Hello and welcome to this edition of Biblical Insights. Let's jump to Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. The Hebrew reads, Vayishma'u eth kol Yahweh Elohim mithalech bagan l'ruach hayom. And in English, this reads, And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Now, this reading has struck some scholars as rather odd. God is coming in judgment, but it's though he's taking a leisurely stroll through the garden in the cool of the day. We're going to look at how this translation came to be and then look at some information from other ancient Near Eastern languages that perhaps helps inform our reading of the Hebrew in Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. So let's dive into it. All right, we'll start by writing this out. Hopefully it'll be somewhat legible to you. And this is L'Ruach Hayom. And, wow, that's messy. That's really messy. But anyway, L'Ruach Hayom. This is the phrase, in the cool of the day, or translated in the cool of the day. Now, this is just, over here, this is an inseparable preposition. We don't need to talk about that. We'll look at this word, ruach. And the semantic range for this word is typically going to be something like spirit, wind, or breath, right? Spirit, wind, or breath. And then you have the day over here, hayom, and this is typically translated day, okay? So just a simplified translation, you have, spirit of the day. This is a bound phrase, a construct phrase. So you have spirit of the day, wind of the day, or breath of the day. Well, if we go with wind of the day, then we can think about a cool part of the day in the cool of the day. Okay, so that works. However, in Accadian, there is a cognate for the Hebrew word yom, or day, and that is transliterated like this, and it means day. However, there's also a homonym in Accadian, this is where it gets really interesting, that means storm. So if we let that inform our reading of Genesis 3:8, then we would get in the wind, or from the wind of the storm. Now, what's interesting is that some lexicons also have a homonym for the Hebrew word yom. That means storm. Now, this is less sure than the translation day for yom. So in this case, if we take the Accadian here, then day becomes storm, and we would use wind for ruach. So this would read something like, to go back to Genesis, and they heard the thunder of the Lord God going back and forth, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, in the garden, in the wind of the storm. Now, it's great to take this information from Cognate studies and use it in our study of Hebrew, but does it match with the Hebrew Bible overall? In other words, does God appear in storm theophanies throughout the Hebrew Bible? And the answer is, of course, yes. There's a list of references. If you'd like to pause the screen, you can take a look at some of those. So this is how your scholarship works. One scholar will put forward his case, and then that will be challenged, and they'll go back and forth, and this is how we learn things. But one criticism of this view is that there just aren't enough elements of a storm theophany to be a very compelling case. Now, I don't think this is necessarily true. Let's look at some examples here. This is Nahum, okay? And Nahum just plainly says in verse 3, this is chapter 1, verse 3, His way is in whirlwind and storm, and the clouds are the dust of his feet. Okay, so this is pretty cool, storm theophany here. These are, for some reason, very interesting to me in the Hebrew Bible. And so chapter 1, verse 3 just flat out says whirlwind and storm. Okay, so that's pretty clear. But then, a bit later, you have these brief allusions. His wrath is poured out like fire in verse 6. Now, fire a lot of times has in view lightning in these storm theophanies. And then verse 8, but with an overflowing flood. So you can see then why in other books like Micah, this is chapter 1, verse 4, like waters poured down a steep place. Even this single line, because of that, and because like wax before the fire, a lot of scholars here see a storm theophany as well. Again, fire, lightning, and then the torrent of waters is vivid imagery of heavy rain that goes along with a storm. So whether, where you stand on this about how many elements of a storm you need to call it a storm theophany, well, that's up to you. But it's a very interesting and I think a compelling view here in Genesis 3:8. There's one more really interesting bit of information, and that is this word I have highlighted in blue. You see walking here in Genesis 3:8 in the English, and then this is over here in the Hebrew, and it's pronounced mithalech. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's something called a hithpael stem in Hebrew. Okay, it's a derived stem called the hithpael, and this stem carries with it sometimes the nuance of iterative or repetitive function. Okay, so think about walking back and forth, like someone is pacing. All right, that's the type of nuance that the hithpael verb stem can have, repetitive action. Now, this is the verb halach in Hebrew, halach, which means to walk or to go more generally. Okay, this verb here, as I said, occurs in the hithpael stem, halach. Okay, hithpael, halach. This also occurs in Psalm 77. The clouds poured out water, the skies gave forth thunder, your arrows flashed on every side. And so you have arrows here. It reminds us of lightning flashing back and forth across the sky. This is clearly a storm theophany, and in the storm theophany we see here the Hebrew verb halach, which is also in the hithpael stem. So that verb occurs clearly in the context of a storm in Psalm 77, and it occurs there in Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. The same stem, the hithpael stem, and it's the same verb as well. So it's further evidence that really, I think, makes this case not unattractive to have God walking back and forth or going back and forth in the garden and speaking from the wind of the storm. So if you put it all together over the centuries, it's been hundreds of thousands of hours and thousands upon thousands of scholars who have done work to give us what today is a really, really good English translation of the Hebrew Bible. Once the latest ESV, once the latest NIV was produced, scholars didn't just say, okay, we're done. No, they continue to do their work, and some of that work, especially in archaeology and cognate studies, really helps us understand the context of the ancient Near East, and it helps us understand the languages of the ancient Near East, of course, of which Hebrew is one of those. And so it's my pleasure to sort of take this material where I can and condense it and adapt it for a YouTube video here that we can include in a series like this on Biblical Insights. So I hope you found it interesting. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.